I will just say, I'm Caleb. I came in basically same time as Kyle. I was elected in November, so I've been on for almost a year, and was really, really excited to get appointed to this group. One of my favorite things is collaborating and working with people, and so I was really excited. And I've been chomping at the bit to get these meetings going, because I hope over the next few years we can find some good opportunities to collaborate with Superior from Louisville for sure. So happy to be a part of this.
Great, and I'm Heather Wilson, Louisville manager in Louisville. Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
So no, I was just gonna say I'm Kyle Brown. I'm a few months behind Caleb. I was appointed to the seat back in January, and I think we've had meetings before, so you all have met me, and I've had a chance to meet and work with you. And Caleb, I'm excited about the work that we're doing together, and look forward to continuing it.
I'll go next. This is Neil. I've been on the Town of Superior board for about 2 years. I got appointed to the Joint Issues Committee about 2 years ago. Sandy was my counterpart. We seem to have had a lot of meetings in, I guess it was calendar 2019, and then it just sort of slowed down for 2020. Notwithstanding COVID, I think just both communities have a lot of stuff going on. So I am anxious, and I've been trying to push to get this going again. So I'm glad to see us meeting again.
Thanks. And Kevin Ryan, I know my name still says Matt. For some reason, I can't click the three dots. I don't see anything how to change the name. So whoever, perhaps we have an administrator here who could do it on the back end, which I've seen people do before. Elected about 4 years ago, and with Sandy's resignation, Neil and I worked together on a couple issues, and thought it might be helpful for me to join. I may not be the full-time representative, but just to have more than one face on the meeting, I thought I'd join today.
I'm Sharon Nemechek, Director of Library and Museum Services for the City of Louisville.
And I'm Megan Davis, the Deputy City Manager in Louisville.
And I'm Matt Magley. I'm the Town Manager here in Superior. So Heather, where should we start? I mean, we got introductions. You want to just start with the library services update?
I think very much. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I love when we talk about collaboration, because it feels like the library is one of those really successful collaborations between the two cities. So first, there's a slide in your meeting packet with the budget information. Do you guys have questions about anything on there? Okay, so I wanted to provide a library services update. So you guys know the library is serving patrons in two ways. We're doing a contactless curbside delivery of library materials. We're also doing take and makes, 3D prints, and other things we're delivering at curbside. And then we're also doing some in-person services, 11 hours a week right now, which is pretty limited, but we're offering almost full service when people are in the building. So we're offering them the ability to browse collections, to do holds pickup, to use our computers. We've removed most of the soft seating and some of the seating upstairs and the toys and children's, just to discourage those long lingering visits, so we can get more people in and out of the building. As you know, we're limited to the number of people we can have in the building at any one time. So we're serving about 200 patrons a day at curbside, and that's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday. And then we were seeing about 70 patrons an hour during our open hours, which was a lot. We're still seeing that on Thursday evenings, so we're planning on extending our Thursday evenings. Right now we're only open 5 to 8. We're going to extend 4 to 8, probably around October 22nd. To try to stretch those out a little bit. We had a line down around the block again Thursday evening at 5:30 this week. But we're seeing Mondays and Tuesdays slow down a little bit. I think it's since school started, so those days are a lot more manageable. So we're going to continue evaluating. I'm kind of in constant contact with Heather and Megan about what Boulder County Public Health is saying and what's happening at the state, to really keep evaluating before we add any more in-person hours. I think right now, with cases and hospitalizations increasing in Colorado, it doesn't seem prudent to add in-person hours at this time. But just know that we're always looking at, should we add in person? Should we go back to more curbside? What does that look like? So we're serving our community the best way we know how. Pre-COVID, we used to circulate about 45 to 46,000 items a month. And in August and September this year, we've circulated almost 30,000 items a month. So we're really doing an amazing business for really having limited hours and limited services. So that's it with services update. Did you guys have questions about anything there?
Sharon, just to, or go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to ask how many people you can have in the building at once. What's the limit?
So when we did the social distancing calculator, we were allowed 82 people in the building at any one time. And what we decided, because of the way we were seeing the disbursement of people in the building, we decided to limit to 50 because we're getting so many in our children's department. And some libraries have someone at the entrance to every department to make sure that there aren't too many people in that space. I just don't have the staff to do that right now. So we're limiting to 50. It ends up being a pretty good, we still had like 35 in children's on early Thursday evening. But as people are moving through quickly, we just felt like that was the best number for us right now. Again, if we see cases decreasing and things getting a little less concerning, we can always raise that number. Again, if we go to a more strict level in the dial framework, we'll have to lower that. I think in the next level, the library's only allowed 25 people. As you know, we opened under the CDPHE guidance for indoor events, which we all thought was a little odd for libraries, but that's when you're looking at that dial framework, those are the guidelines that we have to follow.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is Heather. And I would just say, we were actually starting to talk about allowing more people in that time frame, and then the numbers went crazy in Boulder County.
Exactly.
And so we were concerned that actually we'll have to, as Sharon said, we'd have to go down in the dial and start limiting even more. So we're trying to find that balance between where the numbers are in Boulder County and setting realistic expectations for folks. So we're kind of steady right now, hoping that the numbers continue on the decline, and that although over the winter, I don't know. So I just don't know where the numbers are going to go.
That's the thing. And with staffing being limited and going into cold and flu season, I felt like that sort of stable, as Heather said, that steady service, those things that people know what to expect. I feel like that's our best bet right now. Trustee Shaw.
Yeah, so part of this is, we're all looking at data and everybody's interpreting it in one way or another. And just walk me through the differences between the Louisville Library and the Boulder Public Library, because they are open significantly more hours, and we've got the actual same dashboard with respect to cases. I mean, we're all looking at the same data. And if nothing else, Boulder Public Library should be more curtailed, just given the proximity to CU. Is it a staffing and budget issue beyond the dial?
It's a little bit that, although Boulder's had serious cuts, they've had to close 2 of their libraries for the foreseeable future. They don't think they're even going to open in 21. The big difference is Boulder Library is offering only a grab and go hold service during their open hours. I think there may be a little bit of computer use by appointment, but there's no browsing the collection. Okay. So we really made the conscious decision when we opened that we wanted to offer as many services as we're reasonably, we could reasonably do. So when we're open, we actually have to staff a welcome desk, circulation, adult services, children's services, and the holds room. So it requires kind of a lot of staff, where Boulder is just welcoming people in to pick up their holds quickly and leave the building. And it's only Maine that's doing that. I think Meadows is only curbside at this time. And what we're seeing is a lot of different models across this. So even Arapahoe Library District, which is huge and has all the library money, is only open for appointment right now. So many libraries, districts, and municipal libraries are doing things differently. And this is what we decided to do for our community.
Okay, I appreciate that context, because
Yeah.
I think, and we're seeing this with the schools as well, right? The data, from Boulder Public Health and how it gets utilized between BBSD and St. Vrain. And then I think this is another example of where things are different. So
Absolutely.
the other thing, and I appreciate, I think it's slide 2, just so Caleb and Kyle, so you're giving some context here on how we ended up with this as a slide here. So obviously, the town of Superior contributes a fixed amount based on a mill levy of 1.5, and it goes into the library operating budget. And the town made its contribution in February, and then COVID happened, and the city of Louisville rightfully withdrew some of the financial support to the library given the restrictions and the ability to stay open. So it begged the question for me of, given the reduced operating budget for the library for the rest of calendar 2020, is the town of Superior's contribution oversized? Now, the other 2 slides at the bottom here are actually really helpful with respect to the circulation and the use of the library by Superior, which then if you back that up, or rather if you carry forward, is the town of Superior under contributing towards the operating budget? My position on this at the beginning is if the city of Louisville is going to reduce its contribution, rightfully the Superior residents should see a decrease in the funds coming into the library as well. I don't disagree that the circulation and the use of the library by Superior might be at a higher percentage than the ratio of the funds going in. But if we're talking, equitable contribution, I'm still a little troubled by the budget reduction of the library operating budget and the lack of communication with the town of Superior on that reduction, and the further sort of, what Superior contributed stays flat relative to the operating budget going forward. And this is where, Sharon brought this up rightfully at the library board of trustees, but it was the first time that anybody at Superior had heard about it. We didn't get any communication from Louisville beyond the board of trustees meeting. And I'm a little disappointed with the lack of communication on the operating budget, given the restrictions on COVID that were having a significant impact on the library. But at the same time, the cash coming in from Superior was unfazed.
Thanks, Neil. I appreciate your position. I think it's appropriate for us to make sure that we're, not taking your money and not providing your services, right? Which I think is really your concern, right? Is that you guys give us money and then we close our library and you guys don't get to use it, right? And I don't think that's really what's happening, obviously.
No, and actually, it's not so much that, right? No question, I want Superior to pay its fair share, right? So, if Superior needs to pay $400,000, $500,000, $300,000, obviously we're gated by the mill levy, but it's a function of if the budget is going to get reduced, why not reduce it equitably? Why bring down the Louisville portion of the budget by the amount that it was reduced, but not touch the Superior contribution? And
I have a silly question.
Sure.
Can Superior, because it's mill levy based, can Superior reduce that amount going to the library without a vote, or how would that work?
Well, I think we'd have to look at the IGA. I mean, I think there's a couple points here, right? I think Neil's point, just let me back it up. I think it is less about, we're neighbors, and of course the contribution can and should continue, and we need to follow the terms of the IGA. I think it was just caught us a little bit by surprise, right? And so I think that, one of the great things about this and why I wanted to join is to improve the dialogue, the level of transparency and communication, because none of us knew that, I think we'd all be disappointed just scratching our heads if we're representing the Superior taxpayer to say, hey, wait a minute, if there's a overall, I'm going to make up a number, I know it's not right, 20% reduction in contribution budget for the entire library, yet our contribution remained the exact same because of the 1.5 mils. Maybe that's what exactly has to occur because of the IGA and because of what was voted upon, 7 or 8 years ago. But it was just, we were, as a board, just caught a little flat-footed responding to that. And so, yes, we have representation on the board. Yes, we on the library board. Yes, we have this meeting, but there was just some level of, we just were not aware. Could we reduce that contribution? It's an interesting question given the 1.5 mils. I think we have an obligation for some library services within the town. I think we might have flexibility around where that 1.5, where how those services are established. But yeah, the voters spoke, and they're getting taxed 1.5 for library services, and that's not going to change without going to the polls again. And since this is our only library service option, we probably couldn't make that change, but I think it would have been great to have that conversation. And then maybe it's, okay, Superior, since you're a little bit further away from the Louisville Library, what can we do? Because it does feel a little bit unequitable. If you were, 15% of, again, I'm making up numbers, 2.5 million, but now you're, 18% of 2 million, would it be, what can we do to make sure that you're still getting the same amount of proportionate value?
Yes, I appreciate this conversation, and I definitely hear the piece around just communicating, even if it's a clear communication, hey, this is what's happening, this is what is changing, this is what is not changing, this is what can or can't change. And so we all understand that that's what's going on this year. It's like, okay, well, we get it, and we can explain to our constituents or explain to other people what's going on. I mean, I'm confident, and I'm not hearing anything different from anyone who's spoken, that there are no games being played, right? And I'm not hearing that accusation from anybody. But I kind of think of it as a business person. There are sources of revenue that come in, and that source of revenue coming from Superior through the mill levy is constant and consistent right now, which, if I'm running a library, that's fantastic news. And then the income, the revenue coming from the city of Louisville with their budget cuts and what they're trying to do during COVID. Oh no, that's bad. But I'm just thinking about, what are my sources of revenue and what are my expenses? And there probably could have been a better communication about how thankful we are that 1.5 mil levy is consistent right now and helping keep us afloat this year. And if that's something that needs to be looked at in the future, that's fine. And I think it is a great moment. I think Sharon, you kind of led with that this is just a neat topic, because it's something we actually share as two communities. We do share this facility as well as some others, but it's kind of a nice reality. And so I, for one, am very appreciative of Superior and what you guys are able to contribute every year, and especially this year when we're really hurting. And I think, that ongoing communication transparency will be super helpful.
Yeah, Caleb, and in the spirit of that, I want to sort of transition. Neil, I don't know if you have anything to add, but let me just transition and say that I'm late to this and I haven't attended previous meetings, but we obviously are programming 1500 Colton, the old Range Rover building. We do have an intent to have some library services there. So I do believe it is a topic at a retreat that we'll have in about 10 days to talk about that type of library service. I do think that I would love nothing more than to have continued collaboration with Louisville, where there is some type of annex there, but we need to look at that. And I like the way you looked at it, Caleb, sort of a revenue contribution. We're going to have expenses for 1500 Colton for the library service. And my personal expectation, not representing the entire board, is that the revenue contribution that the Superior taxpayers voted on, whatever, 7, 8, 9 years ago, for library services, there should be some clawback of a portion of that to support the 1500 Colton. Now, whether or not that means that Louisville Library is supporting that annex, staffing the annex, supporting the annex, or whether or not Superior is supporting or staffing the annex and clawing back some of those funds, I think that's for discussion. There's plenty of time for this, because let's face it, it does not appear we're going to be, in person in April, May, June, when 1500 Colton will be, ready to open. It would be inappropriate for us to have full library services, likely. And so we've got a little bit of time, but in the spirit of transparency, these conversations are happening within Superior. And just as we were a little flat-footed with, hey, wait a minute, the total library contribution, library expenses were reduced, proportionally, our revenue contribution was not reduced. I want to be transparent that the Superior Board needs to have this decision, and there's an IGA and there's notification requirements, but there's also just colleagues and neighbors. And so that's why I want to improve the level of transparency. And hopefully you guys are aware of that and paying attention to the conversations that we've been having around that. I don't love the word clawback, but clawback for a proportion of the funds, or an expectation that Louisville will support an annex. And by the way, that means it's not just a small portion, but 1,500 Colton is 15,500 square feet. It's a great building. We want that to be available, just as we're going to make it available for our community members. This amenity should also be available for the Louisville community members, just the same way you've made Louisville Library available for us. So I see this as a new amenity that will enhance the lives of Louisville the same way that the Louisville Library amenity has enhanced the lives of Superior folks.
So, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate those comments. I think the only thing that I would add is that, Louisville voters will look at this chart and they will see that that Superior, even with the mill levy being fixed, contributes far less per capita than your typical Louisville voter. And so, I think it's an ongoing conversation that we need to have about what the appropriate level of contribution is for Superior, for Louisville, how to fund the annex, how are we gonna support the annex? We're partners in this, and we want to work with you. But obviously, our voters have a different perspective potentially on who's funding the bulk of services. So just not to be confrontational or aggressive or anything like that, but I do think that it's important for us to continue the dialogue about what the appropriate contribution from Superior is to services, what kind of services Louisville is willing to provide for that, and how do we work together in the best way possible for the benefit of both of our communities.
No, you're exactly right. That's why I feel like it's kind of the elephant in the room, and I don't know what conversations have been had, but when I ask, I get some shoulder shrugging, which is why I wanted to kind of bring it up. And I recognize it's going to be awkward, and every dollar that is either not contributed or clawed back is a dollar that's not going to a brick and mortar amenity that's already there. And it's a problem, right? And we have to tackle it together, because we need more library services, not less, right? But we don't have more revenue in the current, in a global pandemic where, there's just no more revenue. So we got to figure this out. We got to do it together. So.
And Kyle, I mean, you bring up a really good point in terms of the per capita support. And I think it's something that, and none of us, none of the electeds on this call were part of the IGA 10 years ago. So we're all inheriting an agreement that probably would have been written a little bit differently if we looked at it today with the benefit of hindsight. Because I think, to have it, property tax based on one side, sales and use tax on the other side just creates this exact issue. Because part of the argument is ultimately, from Louisville's side, how much of that is discretionary, fixed, and so on and so forth, versus the mill levy base. It is what it is. With appreciating properties, you're going to get what you get. You can predict it. So I think all of us would like to potentially revisit the IGA and see what tweaks potentially need to be made.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think
we're happy to continue the conversation and have conversations about what the IGA should look like, especially since the support or the situation for Superior with its annex is changing, right? I mean, I think it's a good time to think about how to revisit that. So.
Yeah, and I think it's, looking back and you said, like, I certainly wasn't a part of any of these conversations or decisions over the last, 10, 20, 30, 40 years around things that we're doing. And it's just, it's a really cool, idea that, we're building the library, we're rebuilding the library. Let's make it, we don't need to build two necessarily, right? If we can provide this service for Superior in Louisville, but clearly Louisville benefits from the location. My kids can walk to this library quite easily. So of course, this was always to the benefit of Louisville, and Louisville should be paying the lion's share of it for obvious reasons, right? Like, I wouldn't want to spend a ton of money on a new library in Superior, right? That doesn't benefit me in the same way. But if we didn't have a library here, it would. And so, yeah, I think as you guys continue to grow and your population continues to grow, and you guys, take that step towards a huge expense of wanting, your own library, your own annex, your own what have you, that's going to be an additional expense for you guys. And if you no longer need ours, then we have to take on the entire responsibility of our library. And it's been pretty great to have Superior pay that portion, right? And so all these things, I think you said it well, Kevin, that we want more library services, not less, right? And so I think it's great to grow this, and we just have to do it in a way that feels responsible and friendly and collaborative, and everybody benefits and gains from it. And there's enough time to prepare for all those changes, and maybe to go to our voters, and you go to your voters and see what what people are willing to do and want to do and where those benefits are. But I think this is a good, I don't know if the first step is right, but a good step in the conversation of being a team and addressing it all together. It's not that different from different wards in Louisville.
Good. Yeah, I appreciate it. We again, my intent was not to negotiate a clawback amount. I just want to, these conversations are ongoing, and I've been worried that we're not addressing it, that we're not being transparent enough, that we haven't started. So let's just take this as that first step. If you want to pay attention to the retreat we have next week, and I think you'll probably be able to get the pulse of the current board. And of course, we have an election coming up, so next year's board is going to look a little bit different than this year's board, right? But you should at least be able to get the pulse for the current board on this topic.
So I did have an update about 1500 Colton Road. This was a good segue. And I and the library leadership team have toured the facility and met with the architects and talked about the design of the library space. One of the things I've heard since I started 2 years ago is that Superior residents really wanted a place for holds pickup. So that's sort of what we're focused on right now. I've met with Leslie, and I think Karen is the new rec manager. Is that right? We met last week with a vendor to talk about a holds pickup locker, a remote locker system, but there are some other options as well. So we are having those conversations. We've also talked about story time and some programming over there. And again, as you said, Kevin, it's going to be interesting to see how 2021 goes in terms of in-person programming. So we'll just kind of keep an eye on that. But we are in the conversation about 1500 Colton Road, and excited to be offering some services over there. So the last thing I had was our DEI initiative, our fundraiser. Our community member who did the fundraiser raised over $2,500 to build diversity into our library collections. We just received a Rotary grant through Flatirons Rotary for $1,500. And this is for diversity in our youth collections and adding parenting books in this area. And then we're having a program. You guys know Dr. Anita Mosby-Tyler did the community conversations, and she's going to do a library program, sort of a follow-up to that, at 7 o'clock on October 13th. So that's all I had. Were there any other questions about library services? Yes.
Sharon, I know it's right around 10 o'clock in the morning every time I walk by the library, and there are 40 people waiting to go inside on a normal day in Louisville. It's such a highly sought after location with all of those little kids, and my kids are a little older now, but story time and all that was so important. Have you guys thought about programming story time outdoors at all, whether that's community park, which is far away, or like the Steinball, which is across the street, or trying to do outdoor socially distanced story time for kids? I know the weather's turning, so there'll be fewer opportunities for that, but did you explore that at all, or was that not possible? Or?
Yeah, we explored that possibility, and I'll tell you right now, some of it's COVID and some of it is just staffing constraints. We went from 21 FTE to 13, and 2 of those FTE can't work in the building. So we're doing a lot of business with about 11 FTE, and so it's trying to figure out how to serve more of our community with a lot fewer people. But just so you know, we are talking about that again for the spring. We felt like this year it was a concern for us, partially because libraries opened under the guidance for indoor events. So it was partially that there was no state guidance around this. I've been in touch with the Colorado Public Library directors. There are some libraries like Douglas County who is just doing business as usual, story times inside and that kind of thing. But 90% of libraries are doing no in-person service, even outside. And the ones that are, I think Vail has done a little bit, but even outside, you have to have people so distanced and keeping the kids from sort of being with each other. It felt a little irresponsible, to be honest. So I made the call to not put ourselves in that position. But we are looking at it. We're talking about summer reading for next summer. And we're looking at how do we start in May with something at Steinbach. And so we feel like, you know, everybody, fingers crossed, that we'll be ready in May to start doing some kind of in-person programming and events outside.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, thank you.
Okay, we can move on to the next. It's just an update. Megan Davis, our deputy Louisville city manager, provided some materials, and they're the same material. We jointly funded a consultant and have done some work around the airport issues, and so the most recent information is in your packet. And Megan, I don't know if you want to add anything, and then
Sure.
Interested in your conversation at this point.
Thanks, Heather. I can provide a couple updates, and then also, of course, Town Manager Magley can also chime in. I'll start with just an update on the conversations about the Community Airport Noise Roundtable, and then I'll talk just a little bit about some updates on the work of the consultants with ABC ×2. So the Community Noise Roundtable, you know, this is an effort that we've kind of been working on for about a year, establishing a multi-jurisdictional noise roundtable. We're trying to set something up that reflects the FAA guidance around what, you know, how a roundtable should be structured, because our hope is that this will become a vehicle by which we can advance recommendations to the FAA to actually make changes in airport operations, such as recommended flight paths for flights coming out of RMMA that could potentially reduce the impacts. So that's really our goal in establishing this, as well as I think creating a regional collaborative group that can have a shared understanding of the airport, the values that it brings to the communities, but also the reality of the impacts that it brings to the communities. So a group of staff from each of the local jurisdictions who are going to be involved has been meeting for the past, I think we've had 3 meetings, 3 months. And those meetings and the roundtable will include Arvada, Broomfield, Westminster, Louisville, Superior, and Boulder County and Jefferson County. Jefferson County has been convening those meetings, and their county attorneys and their staff have been sort of kind of facilitating them. But I would say, and again, I'd let Matt chime in, I think the meetings have overall been positive. The participation from the communities, Arvada has been at all the meetings, including, you know, participation by their city manager. Broomfield, Westminster have been at most of the meetings, but have had good, you know, participation. Jefferson County and Boulder County, you know, have been really committed to the conversation. So from the perspective of getting the communities to the table and them making the commitment to participate in this on an ongoing basis, I feel pretty positive about it. I think, you know, we're moving in the right direction. We now have established bylaws and an IGA agreement for all of the parties that will be going, each of the parties will be taking them to their jurisdictional bodies, to their boards or councils in the next month or so. And so we're hoping by at least by mid-November, possibly before that, we'll have all of the entities officially signed on to participate in the roundtable. The financial contribution initially is pretty minor. I think we left it open for the first year, but we're probably looking at $3,000 to $5,000, and those funds would be used to hire a facilitator. And one of the first tasks of the roundtable will be to sort of interview facilitators. We've gotten some facilitators' names that the group has kind of looked at, and I think we really would like the roundtable body itself. So each of the jurisdictions will have to make their appointments to the roundtable. I think it's likely that most of the jurisdictions, at least at the onset, will have elected officials as their appointees and then have an alternate that would be a staff person who might join the meetings as well. But that's, I think, what we anticipate will happen in Louisville, and it seemed like the other jurisdictions felt like they would want to have that level of engagement as well around the roundtable. So I would just make a, I mean, one of my comments I think that I would make about, I think it's been pretty clear in the conversations that our focus, we're really going to need to maintain focus on the disproportionate impacts to our communities. We are getting a lot from some of the other communities about, you know, the fact that we're not recognizing the economic benefits and how important they are. And of course, we're not necessarily getting a lot of those economic benefits, but we are getting all of the impacts. And so I think we're really trying to assemble some data. We actually have a couple constituents who have been working on mapping in their free time in Louisville, and we're working with them to try to get some data that we can really illustrate that you know, the impacts are pretty disproportionate to the north. So those are some of that's kind of an overview. Matt, I don't know if you have any other comments you want to share as well.
Thanks, Meg. No, I mean, I think you provided a good summary. I would agree that I think it's been a pretty positive conversation in our meetings. And right now I've got the agreement, the IGA, to go to my board on the 26th of October. So yeah, I agree. It's been good and looking forward to the first roundtable and getting things going.
Yeah, agreed. We have it on our city council agenda for October 19th for a discussion about airport noise for the IGA and the bylaws approval for an appointment. And then just so the trustees and Matt, you're aware as well, we're having someone from Congressman Negus's office come and provide a federal update too. I don't expect there's going to be much. I know there hasn't been much movement, but I think, like Trustee Shaw said at the beginning of the meeting, I mean, we're pretty far removed from the levers of control around this issue. And so we've just been trying to stay as engaged with the federal folks as we can to maintain any influence that we might have through them. So.
Megan, I appreciate your presentation as well. And I think that I think it's really good to be thinking about that economic benefit, and it's not dissimilar to, you know, a factory in Broomfield that's polluting a river that goes into Louisville. I mean, of course that factory is making money. Of course that is important. But if the pollution, in this case, it's noise pollution, is affecting the communities around, right, that has to be mitigated. And yeah, I mean, would we be more tolerant if it was a major tax base for us? I don't know, you know, but that's an interesting conversation of, you know, like, you know, would opinions change if it was benefiting us more? And I don't think they would, but that's, you know, an interesting angle for us to think about.
Deputy City Manager Davis, I really appreciate your work on this, and I'm looking forward to having the conversation at our board meeting or our council meeting. I think, you know, we're still a long ways off, but you know, I have been encouraged a little bit that maybe some of the flight schools we've made some progress with, or at least one anyway. That you know, other communities seem to be showing up. And for us, you know, I think the stakes are much higher. So it's encouraging that, you know, we're getting some participation from Jeffco and from Arvada and some other places. But you know, it's going to be a long haul, and you know, even if we are able to come to some agreement, there appears to be no guarantee that, the FAA will accept our recommendations necessarily. So I think that's why having our federal delegation engaged in this will really matter, and their guidance and also their ability to push and say, look, our communities have come together and come up with a plan. Then that I think that will be really, really effective. So whether or not Congressman Goose's office has any significant updates when they brief us, I think is almost irrelevant. I just appreciate them being engaged and willing to potentially push on our behalf with the FAA. So,
Megan, I really appreciate the update. I mean, and Kyle and Caleb, just so you guys know, I mean, a year ago, the FAA had a meeting at the airport for the electeds. And we've come a long way since there. We didn't even have a draft of an IGA at the time for the roundtable. The message we heard loud and clear from the FAA administrator is, you guys have to use a roundtable. It's the only way that we'll do anything, which is unfortunate. But I can understand the FAA's position is they want to make sure that whatever they do is driven through a collaborative organization such as a roundtable. And that's really the issue that our communities continue to face, and that what we feel is asymmetric, and the FAA will counter. It's like, well, how do you know? Because you haven't actually engaged the other communities. So it has been a long slog to get here, but I think you guys have done some pretty good work so far, and I'm anxious to see this continue to keep moving.
Would you guys like a quick update on ABC ×2?
Yeah.
I don't know how. Okay.
Yeah.
We sent they're providing monthly updates on what they're working on, and I think it's tricky because it is, as everyone has mentioned, it is such a long game, and a lot of the work that they've been doing is behind the scenes with the noise task force, and then they've been meeting and remotely and communicating with some of the flight schools individually to sort of educate them about the noise reduction and noise mitigation measures that have been put in place at the airport, why they're important, and also kind of surveying them about what they see is happening. Of course, they feel like they're passing the information on. I think it's just something we're going to have to continue to hammer on from sort of an education and marketing perspective with the airport, with RMMA itself, and make sure it's a priority. So I think we're coming to we still have some tasks that haven't been completed with ABC. We're going to be meeting with them tomorrow. We want them to move faster. I think they've been a really good partner. They're really technically savvy. They bring a lot of expertise, which has been really helpful in developing our kind of matrix of priorities and recommendations, which is great. And we've just really been kind of pushing them on the implementation and execution. And I think they're getting some of this work done. I think it's just, it's just kind of slow going. So I think at the end of this year, as we move into New York, we'll think about, what we want to do moving forward. I think it's going to be a challenge to have a consultant on retainer indefinitely for some of this. So I think it's just thinking about where our best investments can be made to address this issue. So we're thinking about that as we kind of look forward.
Megan, I think that's also a topic for us at our retreat. I will say that there are a couple board members in Superior that have vocalized their disappointment in ABC ×2 in a couple different areas. Number one, really giving us some tactical things that we could do. Not, oh, you should have a roundtable, or oh, you should improve communication, but actually being much more prescriptive around what we can and should do. And second, just I think to your point, execution, right? Where there seems to be some meetings, and meetings are good, but we're not going to have a long-term engagement with a consultant that facilitates meetings. That's, you've done a really nice job helping Louisville. Kevin Colon on our end has represented. So we could do that with staff. We don't need consultants. And so I think if you're it sounds like we're pretty aligned, but in order for their continued engagement, we're going to have some really prescriptive things that they're requiring, and then we're going to hold their feet to the fire for execution. That doesn't mean that everything we propose is going to be successful. So, for example, there's been talk around, can we suggest landing fees? We have no control, of course, over landing fees and whether or not they implement that or not. But even having an understanding around what airports have landing fees, what conversations can we have, how might they be structured, the pros and cons of which, those conversations have to progress. And it seems, to Neil's good point, we as towns have made tremendous progress in collaborating with the roundtable and other things. I haven't seen that type of progression with ABC ×2. And so they're going to need to see, we're going to need to see some changes from them, because I think they're losing support from at least 2 to 3 members of the Superior Board.
Well, I appreciate those comments, and I think one thing I would say, just reflecting on what they've provided to us, is I think Kevin's done such an exceptional job of managing this at the town of Superior, and Emily Hogan has been working on this too for the city of Louisville and has done a fantastic job. And I think a lot of the knowledge and expertise and competency that we've been able to build on internally has come from our work with them. So I think they've really brought a lot to help us get to that place. And so now I think it's thinking about where we are currently, what we need moving forward, and what they can bring to the table for that.
Good. Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
We are aligned.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys have? I know you just met with the budget, and I'm sure this is in there. What do you guys have budgeted for airport consultants next year? Off the top of your head?
No. Well, yes. We actually didn't budget for an airport consultant. We budgeted for the roundtable. So I can't remember if we ended up putting in 10 for the roundtable, but at least 5, because we knew we wanted to put in funding for the roundtable. We thought that if we wanted to do, in the past, we've kind of gone to council and discussed the airport roundtable the airport consultant and what our needs are. So we thought, once this contract is up and we've completed this work, we need to sort of develop a new plan for how we want to move forward and what the needs are, because it could shift to what we really need is to invest into some type of tracking system or monitoring system, so I think our needs may change moving forward. So we just don't know exactly what that is. So we didn't put money in the budget at this point, but we anticipate once we have a sense of that, we would go to council to ask for a budget adjustment for that.
Thanks for that update. That was really helpful. We don't have any more questions, or are there any more questions around the airport or updates or future work? Matt, you want to give an update on the downtown Superior?
Sure. So we provided some information in the packet for everybody to see, kind of goes over what's been approved to date. Most of the projects has final development plans approved on it. You can see that on page 12, I think, of your packet. But we're still waiting on FDPs for blocks 2 and 8, which are at the corners of McCaslin and Main Street. And then block 1, lot 3, next to the Element Hotel is still, does not have a final development plan on it. And then blocks 26 and 27 towards the south edge of that should be coming forward to our board in December for that final development plan. The Morgan Ranch Main Street project, which included blocks 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11, which are all the majority of the blocks along Main Street. That final development plan was approved last year. or was it this year? It might have been this year. It was towards the end of last year, this year. But with the coronavirus pandemic hitting, their financing kind of came to a halt, and so they're continuing to try to get financing for that project, and hopefully they'll have that resolved this year, end of this year maybe, so we can get construction started on the Main Street portions of the blocks summer of next year is the hope. The parks, which are along Coal Creek, parks 1 and 2, that construction will start this probably November, along with the Marshall Bridge, which crosses over the creek. That should start in November as well. And both the parks and the bridge should hopefully be done by fall of next year. So we're looking forward to that. Let's see. And then we have one other park that needs a final development plan on it, and that's near the cemetery, tract D1. I think it shows up on your plans. And that should come forward, that final development plan for the park next year, early next year is the hope. The hotel is faring okay during the pandemic. We're starting to see numbers increase as far as room rentals starting to go back up. The medical office building is pretty much leased out. Sports stable is struggling during the pandemic, but we're hoping that they can get through to where restrictions start to loosen hopefully next year sometime. The restaurant and the sports stable changed ownership and is now called Rock Creek Bar and Grill. It was formerly Brunelleschi's restaurant. And then the residential to the south continues to progress. Sales seem to be pretty steady for the builders, even given the pandemic that's going on currently. So, and then we just provided some pictures of some of the projects that were done and the Main Street project, but happy to answer any questions you might have on it.
I don't have really specific questions, but I did sit in on one of your board meetings a while back. I was impressed at how late you guys go.
Yes. Like delay, yes.
Child's play over here in Louisville. He goes like 2 a.m. But
we don't do that anymore. The board adopted a policy to end at 11.
It's after our bedtime in Louisville. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We can only go till 10. So.
But yeah, it was interesting for me to watch and listen to obviously some of the same issues that we deal with in Louisville as you're dealing with this immense project, and obviously one of them is the residential coming before the commercial, and having to keep pushing on that commercial. And I think the meeting I was present for, you guys are talking about doing some work live combinations with those Main Street spaces. And again, it's like all these creeping residential into these commercial spaces, and like no, we want this balance of commercial and residential, but as a city you can only go so far in making it, like the market has to make it. But it was an interesting thing to watch, and I continue to be interested in how the whole thing plays out. And this is not, as you clearly know, a 1-year project. This is a 10-20 year thing that you guys have been working on for a long time and will continue to work on. And but I have to admit, I haven't gone back into some of that development. I go to the sports table regularly before COVID, and I'll be there Thursday night with my women's soccer team. But I'm like, I really want to drive around and walk around and like see some of those spaces that from a distance I don't really have as good of a concept for. So it's fun seeing some of these newer pictures of the space. And I know it's nothing's perfect, and it's controversial and difficult to get a project like this through. But I hope that Louisville can learn a lot from what you guys are doing and some of the risks that you took, and what worked and what hasn't worked. And again, one of those opportunities for collaboration. I know that you and Heather speak regularly, and at that staff level is where it's most important. But yeah, just from all of you, just really wanting to learn from what's going well and what's been a continued frustration, and a year from now, 3 years from now, what you did to finish it, right, to get those last things done, and the pandemic is a tough piece to come right in the middle of, well, I don't know if middle is right, but in the process to have the pandemic come is really interesting. We'll see what happens the next year or two, and those rebounding and different use of office spaces and all outdoor retail. I mean, in some ways it's nice that these buildings haven't been built. We have a program right now to help our businesses revamp their spaces for more COVID friendly layouts, maybe a garage door, maybe a drive-through window. And it's like, oh, well, if I'm building it tomorrow, I might be able to be real thoughtful about it. Might be the best space to come post COVID because it was built with COVID in mind and a new psychology of consumer in mind. And so it could be an amazing example of the future of retail and business, and maybe more open air, more space, all that good stuff. So anyway, no real questions. Just I'm super entertained by it and really enjoy watching the process, and hopefully we learn a bunch.
Caleb, since you gave me the opening, the meeting that ran till 2 was a Toll Brothers FDP, and I just want to plant a bug in everyone's ear on an issue that both our communities are going to face. And I think we also have to loop BBSD in here, because those homes, they're districted to all feed into MOHI, or actually Monarch K through 12, right? So in order to get there, it's you got to get out on 88th and then drive over the 88th Street Bridge. And I think what we may end up seeing increased demand for is Campus Drive, some sort of bridge over the highway to increase that access, unless BBSD follows through with some sort of redistricting on those homes. Obviously, it is Boulder. Everybody can choose to go to which school they want to. But given kind of the way that things are going to evolve when kids are back in the buildings, I personally think it is going to be an issue in terms of how to get these kids from basically around what you can see on the map is a cemetery, which is kind of really close to the existing pedestrian bridge, and get them over that highway and into the Monarch system. So not a lot to discuss about it right now, but it is something that I think is definitely one of my concerns with the way that Superior has historically been sliced up, where everything sort of north of that buffer within the town feeds into Monarch K8 and the high school.
It's interesting. This is kind of a side note, but I grew up in Boulder when Monarch came in. For me, that was definitely Superior's high school, right? Which is such an interesting thing now to be a Louisville resident and a Louisville City Council member, and like, Monarch's Louisville's. It's like it for me as a kid, the development in Superior and the creation of Monarch High School were obviously intertwined, and it was I've always, but it's so interesting to have it across the highway and all the issues that presents for you guys, and access and all of that, and identity, right? So anyway, very, very interested to see how that plays out as well.
Any other questions on that project? All right. So next on the agenda was the 88th Street project, and I'll start out by thanking everybody for their patience while the road was closed. Timing worked out kind of well with the pandemic and a lot of people working from home, and traffic may not have been what it was in the past during the time we had it closed, but we were able to get that open middle of May. So the closure did help expedite the project. We did a full depth reconstruction of that roadway. We had some center turn lanes, bike lanes, curb and gutter, sidewalk along the east side with a 10-foot wide multi-use trail. We got a pedestrian refuge with rapid flashing beacon for pedestrians to cross, and we were able to set it up so that if we ever decide to go to 4 lanes, that we'll be able to do that at some point in the future if it's ever needed for traffic capacity. So I think it's a good project. I think the road's a lot safer than it was. It's a lot better shape than it was. It was in really bad shape, and it's something that the town needed to do this year for sure. We put it off a couple of years because of maybe possible development of the property on the east side of that road, but it's good to have it done, good to have it open, and just have some final landscaping stuff we're doing over there now. But we're pretty happy with the way the project turned out. So, and residents were pretty understanding of closing the road and of getting it done quicker and open earlier. So it's a good project. And any questions on it?
So is that green striping for the bike path crossing lane kind of standard protocol now? Obviously, we've been doing that in Louisville. I didn't know if that was.
Yeah. Trustee Ryan, I think, was motivator behind that, big on bike safety, and we got a group together of bike experts from Boulder and Boulder County and the town, and that was one of the recommendations that came out of that group, I believe. And so we've done some of that on McCaslin. We're gonna start doing more of it around town.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any intention in the continuity with Louisville, but I like that there is, if you drive down, some of our recently, Pine and Cherry, it looks very similar. It's kind of nice to see that consistency within our community.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's kind of best practices right now.
Yeah, I think we're using some of the same people. So between Boulder, Louisville, and Superior,
Yeah.
so it's looking good. It's surprisingly, we just had a traffic and safety meeting the other day, and for whatever reason, that green paint is more expensive than I would have expected, or at least the restriping project can be pretty expensive. But for me, on kind of the core areas where cyclers are going to be, where there's more than 1,000 cars a day, places like McCaslin, 88th, other places, we absolutely need to stripe that and make sure that cars are aware that cyclists are there. So.
Yeah.
So you guys have both given me a perfect lead in to, one of the things that happened with the COVID sort of pandemic early on is a lot more people were riding their bikes, in areas that, they hadn't done it before. And one of the things I did hear is a lot of people riding their bikes to downtown Louisville. There's a certain ice cream shop down there that a lot of people really like. But the complaint I have heard consistently is when you cross 88, there's no protection. There's no bike lane, there's no sidewalk. And, obviously on our side, we didn't have anything up until a month ago. So, this is an evolution, but, what is a plan to sort of provide some sort of protection to bikers? Whether it's green stripe, it's a bike lane, it's a sidewalk, because between Campus Drive and Dillon, when I've gone with my kids, we'll cut over into the Mohai parking lot, we'll go through a tunnel, we'll come around and just do stuff like that. But it's not sort of intuitive. We know that route, and I'm just curious what the plan is to just provide that protection.
Heather, do you want to speak to that? I mean, we have a transportation master plan. We have a number of projects on, but I don't know that I'm familiar with enough of our transportation projects.
Right, exactly. And I'm not sure where 88th and Dillon and the connection and all, I'm not sure where that is in the pipeline. We're going to be looking at additional projects in the future, but Megan, I don't know if you have anything to add, but we can follow up with you.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. I mean, it's in our transportation master plan, which has literally hundreds and hundreds of projects. I would say it's not a high priority as we rank our other projects within the city. And it's also one of those projects that we have anticipated would potentially be part of future development. Because we do have an area that's undeveloped there right along 88th Street. So it's
What's
something
that?
yeah. So it's, we we have kind of categorized our projects as projects that would essentially be all city funded and that potentially could be funded as a part of future development. So there's nothing in the short term, in our short term plans, improvements at this point.
Well, we certainly don't want to do anything to discourage you from going to Sweet Cow with your kids. That's in Ward 3, which is my ward. So, you know, you should come as much as you want, is all I'm saying.
Noted.
No, it's a good point though, because I've thought a lot about that connection, not so much. So I'm glad you brought it up, because I think a lot about the Broomfield community that was built just on the other side of 470, and that it would be great if they were more connected, you know, via bicycle to our downtown as well. I mean, it's nice for them. It's an amenity for them, even though it's a sales tax generator for us. It's nice for Superior residents to be able to access Coal Creek Trail from different angles and to be able to, you know, get into some of those nice areas, and it's amenity for them and sales tax for us. So I do think it's a good thing to think about. And I was, as Megan said, I was kind of thinking about like, well, that area is, you know, under consideration for development. So I'm sure that connection is also, but you know, but I think we did put a decent amount of work with the tunnel and all that to connect our neighborhoods, Louisville neighborhoods, to Monarch, so that the kids who are trying to get from their Louisville home to their Louisville school have a safer route. But yeah, that connection from 36 to Dillon isn't as robust, and it should be. So again, we'll just do everything first.
No, actually, you do bring up, you know, a challenge we have on sort of the south side of Campus Drive in terms of getting our kids to Mohai,
Yeah.
right? Because, you know, I think as we've said before, you know, there's a sidewalk on the west side that just sort of ends, right? It's literally just ends, and it doesn't even connect to the bikeway, short of, you know, a 20-foot dirt trail. You know, to the degree that you've got a concrete contractor already on retainer, and you can make these little connections, it does make it really easy, much easier for kids to get to school. You know, I know that we all want kids to ride safe, but we actually have to provide the way for them to do that. And I'd implore any of you to just kind of start in Superior and try to get to Monarch, you know, as a K8. Because remember, you know, all of our apartments feed into Monarch K8. The Bell Flatirons feed into Monarch K8. And you'd be really hard pressed to have a continuous path depending on which side of the street you're on. So at some point, you know, this summer, well, summer's over, just try riding your bike around and see the little pieces that I think, you know, we can work together to connect to make it a safer and easier path.
No, I know it came up late in this conversation, but I do think it is a perfect example of the partnership between our two cities, is us doing something on our side of the line that really is to benefit residents on your side of the line. And that's how you build community and collaboration, is, you know, doing things for each other. And so I think that's definitely something that, you know, I can support us, you know, in the 2021 work plan, you know, as we talk about different things, different projects. And, you know, if the question comes up, I'll have a better sense now of advocating for that project to move up in the order of things. I might lose, but
that's fine.
So last thing on the agenda is just other items, other opportunities for collaboration. If anybody has anything for.
I had a question really to, you know, speak to anybody, to speak to the health of the Louisville restaurants. You know, we've lost 3 so far, all in the Rock Creek Village area, the Pizza Hut, Subway, and Del Vecchio's. And we obviously have some that are still struggling. You guys have done a phenomenal job, in my mind, of opening up downtown with, you know, shutting the street down. I've been to, I think, every restaurant out there, and we love it. And if I can plant another bug in someone's ear, never reopen downtown the street. I think it's fantastic as a pedestrian area. I know everybody will probably hate me for that, but I don't live in Louisville, so I don't have to deal with that. I think you guys have done a phenomenal job of just, you know, of pushing that through. But, you know, how are your restaurants doing? You know, what are you hearing from the owners?
yeah, I can speak to that. I have a particularly kind of close relationship with a lot of the restaurants. I was on the DBA as the restaurant representative for a while, and I also have created an event in which we put a ban in all the restaurants. I just had, previous to city council, a lot of connections, and so anecdotally, I have a lot of information. Obviously, our economic vitality director, Megan Pierce, is the one who's working with them and has done an incredible job with the DBA and with the businesses. But they're doing really well as a whole. We lost Henry's, but that is COVID matters for sure. But there are a lot of extenuating circumstances with Henry's as well, and it could come back. But yeah, I mean, the businesses that have done well have continued to do well, and the residents, I'm sure both Superior and Louisville together did a really good job in the early months of supporting them with takeout and gift cards and all these things. And I was driving by on Friday night, and my God, I mean, it was almost worrisome, right, at how bustling the area is, but it is all outdoor and pretty great. And so I think there's a lot of fear of how the winter is going to go, because they survived with takeout, then they survived with outdoor eating. Can they survive again going back to takeout as kind of their model? But what I was able to find from a lot of them was, it's sort of like, it really depends on how you look at it. The business owners were able to continue being successful by not having employees and having bare minimum, so they could have 50% of their revenue or 40% of their revenue, but 40% of their cost. And so from a bottom line, restaurants don't make much money anyway, and they were able to make it work, and their employees weren't horribly affected because they could get unemployment pretty easily. So my worry is we're kind of going to go back to that this winter, where we go back to skeleton crews and the owners and managers being the hostesses and what have you. So we'll see how that goes, but I think this winter, depending on how bad COVID is and how bad the restrictions are this winter, that might be when we lose a couple. But it's been incredible. I mean, I went to Pika's the other day to talk to him about gift cards for school teachers, and he said to me, he's like, we want to do a $10,000 worth of gift cards project for our teachers. Like, what? Like, so Pika's is doing okay. Moxie's doing better than they were. Lulu's is doing really well. A lot of these restaurants are doing really well. And some continue to struggle, but I think were struggling before as well. So there's a lot to do with it, but I really appreciate your comments, and Megan Pierce has been remarkable in the amount of effort she's put into the project, and the EVC, which I sit on, has done a lot of work as well. And then council has been really helpful, I think, to staff in allowing these things to go. And there's just been so much time and effort put into it. And it's not, we have 17 restaurants in downtown, 70 across the city, and we haven't lost any of the 70 really, except for, again, Henry's for now. So it has been a success story. I just, I'm concerned at how much longer that success story can go on with COVID. So I know that was long, but it's something I'm highly involved with. So I appreciate the time.
No, much appreciated.
I had to step out for a minute. I don't think it was discussed, but I'd love to sort of any additional news. We obviously read the paper around Redtail and Medtronic. Anything else you could share around those plans? Or next steps?
I would just say, number one, it's still in the pipeline, so it's still quasi-judicial. So I'm gonna just, it's really high level. So we have two folks here who would make ultimate decisions around that. So it's still in the pipeline. Medtronic was obviously part of a larger development plan, so they are looking at a site in Lafayette as well at this point. Not sure where right now. Again, the last action that was taken by the developer was it was remanded to Planning Commission, and they were going to come back with revised plans. So we still anticipate those revised plans. Don't know if that will be the case in the future. That's where we are.
So you didn't receive any official notice from Medtronic that they were out of the?
We did. We received a letter from them saying that they'll be looking at an alternate site, and they're no longer looking in Louisville. But again, they're one piece of a larger development plan. So There's the development plan for the site versus Medtronics was one piece of that site. So those are two different issues, I guess. But yes, Medtronics sent a letter and said they were looking at alternate sites.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, and then the only other thing I did ask Megan to make sure this was on the agenda, just to sort of open conversation around collaboration and other pieces. And I got really excited about the joint fireworks that didn't end up happening, obviously for several reasons. But I just think as we move forward, I just I want to make sure our staff and your staff are are thinking about ways in which our communities can collaborate on community events and things like fireworks and parades and all that good stuff, and drawing Louisvillians into your area, and certainly as Main Street starts to get finished for you guys, just thinking about how we encourage each other to cross over 36 and visit each other's spaces. And I get a little bit of a glimpse into that because I'm a chamber member of both Louisville and Superior. And so it's kind of fun to get invited to Superior chamber events. And sometimes they do events together, right? And those, whenever you have the Louisville chamber and the Superior chamber working together, for me, it just feels good. It feels good from a business perspective, and I think it feels good from a resident perspective. So, just thinking about those ways of connecting, and maybe when we get that bridge, we can have a bike race that goes, from Louisville to Superior, and back, or what have you. But yeah, so that's all. Just excited for any other moments of collaboration.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say that thanks for a meeting this morning and getting us back on the agenda for both of our groups, and looking forward to working with you all more on airport noise through the roundtable, and keeping talking about the library and everything else that we need to be working on. So thanks for your work, and look forward to seeing you in downtown Louisville sometimes.
I appreciate the call, the meeting. As Kevin alluded to, we do have an election coming up, so we typically scramble who is on what committee after the election. So whether or not it's either of us is TBD. But irrespective of who's on here, I think both communities work well together, and we want to continue that.
Are either of you up?
How many people are up for re-election? And
3 are up, which includes Kevin, Mark Lasis, and then Sandy Hammerly resigned early. So those 3 seats are open this cycle.
Great. All right.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks everybody. I'll work with Heather. We'll work together for the next meeting of this group, and hope everybody has a wonderful week. Heather?
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.